Hey there everybody, welcome back to the channel. Thanks for tuning in again for another weekly update on news and information about DCS World. I'm your host, Prickly Hedgehog. I hope this video finds you well. It's been a busy week for me catching up on stuff, so not a lot of flying time unfortunately. But let's delve into this week's newsletter, which is a little bit interesting and features some cool stuff, including news about the SuperCarrier, which is going to get some new features for Q3 in 2021. And of course, it sounds like too, Eagle Dynamics is close to releasing both 2.7 and also the Marianas Islands map. Marianas has featured this week, and they've focused on Guam, which they've been working on. Again, it sounds like the team are very close to releasing this map, which is exciting. It's going to give us another theater of operations to play in. So let's talk about those features right now. Now, before we begin, of course, we know we are moving to 2.7, and of course this has been delayed a little bit. Now, I know some people are a little frustrated about some of the delays that occur in this game with regards to updates. And one of the reasons for the delay in some of this stuff is that remember that last year when we went to 2.5, we had a lot of problems after that. There was a lot of bugs, and that caused some real headaches for Eagle Dynamics to unravel and squash, and they spent pretty much the rest of the year doing that. And it forced them to basically change the way in which they do their updates. Now, ultimately, it's been a good thing, but it does mean that there's a little bit more of a gap between the major patches. It gives them more time to prep things before they throw them into the game. It's less, I don't want to say haphazard, because that's a completely inappropriate term, but it feels less haphazard from a gaming point of view or a user point of view, because it clearly shows that they've done a lot of work to make sure that those patches, when they are introduced, are not going to cause major conflicts or crashes or other issues that we've seen in the past, certainly around this time last year. So in other words, Eagle Dynamics has learned from those mistakes, and they are keen, very keen to avoid them, I think, in the future. Hence the little delay, but of course a lot of us are chomping at the bit to see these clouds and the various other features that have been talked about that are going to be included as part of this update. So stay tuned for more. Now, the SuperCarrier, as mentioned, what we're going to get is the 3D Airboss pre-fly, I think it is, station that will come with the possibility to control the deck floodlights, the speed and direction of the carrier, and monitor the plat camera. In addition, they're going to implement launch and recovery operations from the Airboss via 5MC messages. Now, I'm not sure what the 5MC messages is exactly, but I'm basically guessing that while you as a virtual pilot don't see all the things that are going on behind, in the real world, of course, there is a massive number of people that are responsible for all the little things that make sure that these aircraft can land without, snapping cables, or going off the edge of the ship because the cable isn't catching it, the weight properly. And then, of course, equally the launch, so there's a lot of calculation that goes on and a lot of systems, a lot of mechanical things that had to be monitored as well. So the collection of people working behind the scenes, and sometimes with almost no communication whatsoever with the pilots and things like that, outside of how much fuel you've got left and all that kind of stuff. There's very minimal communication sometimes for these case one recoveries, which requires a tremendous amount of coordination behind the scenes, which you can take for granted a little bit as a virtual pilot. So these implementations are kind of cool, gives us a little bit of behind the scenes stuff, plus it gives us some other angles and things to look at how this whole thing looks from a carrier ops point of view, which I'm very excited about. Now, in addition to this, we're also going to get the 3D briefing room, which will offer interactive squadron meeting capability. This is particularly interesting for multiplayer action, of course, pre-mission start and for after-action review. The integrated voice chat that Eagle Dynamics introduced last year will also allow real-time comms with your squadron, an interactive map, plat camera, greenie and kill boards will provide simultaneous online statistics during mission progression. Each pilot seat in the briefing room includes an interactive tablet that will allow you to control the fueling and arming of your aircraft, which was pretty darn cool. So there's a lot of nifty features there, and I was interested in this one too, that they're going to be able to offer us in the upcoming update too, the ability for human LSOs to control the cut lights and the wave off lights for network players. So if you're a co-op player, online multiplayer stuff is going to be really, really cool for that. It's going to add a new dimension to SuperCarrier operations, which is going to be pretty realistic, and that's going to be very handy too, I think, for those that are doing training. There are, I think is it the Maverick Group service I saw? They were doing some cool stuff with an actual, I think it was, who was it now? They had somebody that was actually naval trained and was an actual LSO or something like that, and they were actually practicing this kind of stuff for real. Of course, they didn't have all these features, so what a cool thing to do in the game, and actually have that kind of expert opinion and support to actually improve your flying ability. It was pretty impressive stuff. So those kinds of things are going to be very beneficial for groups of players that enjoy that realism, and it can actually bring in these real life people that have experience, actual pilots, or people that worked on the aircraft carriers and stuff, to provide this sort of expert, if you like, interaction with players like you and I who are learning. So some cool stuff going on in the game, and I think one of the best features of the game in recent times has been this introduction of the SuperCarrier for naval operations. It's absolutely fantastic. There's nothing like it in any other game out there right now, so it's neat stuff. All right, so let's move on then to Guam. And in fact, before we do that, we'll do this Red Flag campaign. This was a little plug they gave for Red Flag 21.1. This is a Bunyat product, and it is actually pretty realistic, apparently. Now, I haven't seen too much footage of it. If you own this campaign, let me know what it's like. It obviously features the F-16. It's set, of course, out on Nellis Air Force Base in Nevada, and you get to fly against adversaries in a well-researched Red Flag campaign. Key features: you get 10 highly detailed missions based on actual Red Flag exercises with optional air start. There is, and that's kind of handy for players who don't want to go through the whole, startup procedure. Okay, cool. Precise and authentic PDF mission briefings adapted from US Air Force standards, a 20-page campaign guide, and a 50-page standard operating procedures document. So for the aeronautical nerds among us, that's going to be some cool reading material. And of course, there's hundreds of authentic voiceovers. Now, a lot of these campaigns that have been released in the last couple of months have been very, very realistic and very, very polished. So we're very lucky that these campaigns have come out in the game. It's added another layer of realism to it, which is really cool, and also a good layer of learning. I've really enjoyed Zone 5. That was a neat campaign, and I'm still working my way through that. I haven't bought any others yet, just because of time constraints, and I wanted to finish the ones that I was working on before I sort of, had too many things to do. But it's been fun bouncing between some of these pre-owned campaigns that I have and just making comparisons, and like I said, some of these new ones are really slick. So if you own this Red Flag campaign, let me know how it is. I suspect you're going to get a lot of learning, and you'll get some good seat time with the F-16, which is always beneficial in terms of familiarization with the aircraft. So again, let me know what you think, because I think a lot of people are interested in these campaigns, and it's not always clear whether or not I should be pulling the trigger, because it's a little bit of a gamble. So if you have some insight, because you already own it, then share the knowledge, share the wealth. All right, let's talk about Guam here. Now, it sounds like Eagle Dynamics is very close to releasing this. They've been particularly proud of some of the features that they've highlighted here, and why not? It's going to be another great theater for us to play around and get to try out some of our modules on. Now, Guam itself, 540 square kilometers, so it's not a huge island by any stretch, but it is the most populated island in the Marianas Islands, or archipelago. Why do I struggle with that? Archipelago. I have to, it just depends on which way I phrase or put my tongue, if you like. Anyway, it lies about 5,800 miles west of San Francisco and 1,600 miles east of Manila. The Chamorro people settled on the island about 3,500 years ago and were essentially disconnected from the rest of the world until the Portuguese explorer Ferdinand Magellan, that Magellan guy, discovered the islands way back on the 6th of March in 1521. Yeah, nice. Guam was subsequently colonized by Spain. No surprise there. The Spanish liked to do things like that back in those days. And that was done about a century later in 1668. Then they got into it with the Americans. So we had the Spanish-American War, and the United States captured Guam on the 21st of June in 1898 as they expanded their territories too. Then the sneaky Japanese attack on Pearl Harbor meant that Guam was actually seized by them in 1941. They occupied the island for a couple of years, about 2.5 years, and then the American forces were able to recapture the islands way back in 1944 on July the 21st. And then, since the 1960s, Guam's economy has predominantly been supported by tourism and, of course, the US military, for which Guam is a major strategic asset. Correct me if I'm wrong, I don't think Guam has its own military force. It relies on the Americans out of kindness, if you like, or out of an agreement between the Guam government, if you like, in the sense that we take the strategic island for our needs and we'll provide you with military support so that you are, not needing your own air force and all the rest of it. So correct me if I'm wrong, but that's my understanding. All right. In addition to that, we have the Antonio B. Wompat International Airport there, which is where you arrive in Guam if you fly there. And it was originally built by the Japanese during the occupation, no surprise there. And it became a base for the USAAF B-24 Liberator bombers between 1944 and 1945. In 1947, the USAAF turned over the airfield to the United States Navy, who operated it as Naval Air Station Agana until 1995. Civilian use of the airport began in 1967 when the international terminal was opened, and then from that time onwards the airport has been reconstructed, sorry I'm blowing through this a little bit quick, and upgraded many times in order to cope with the growing air traffic and passenger requirements. Alright, so one of the things they've had to do here is lots of different features that they've had to develop, some new and some have been adapted for the ground assets that they needed. As said before, the island does have a population of about 160,000 people, and it's divided into 19 municipal villages, and tourism being the most predominant component of the island's economy. There's lots of hotels and golf courses dotted along the Tumon Bay. So it's going to be interesting to see how they've developed those assets. And I think RASBAM had to do the same thing when they, working on the Falklands map, created some new assets. So some cool stuff there. There is a large solar plant on the island as well, the Dandan solar plant. And it has over 120,000 solar panels there, capable of generating more than 25 megawatts of power, which is cool. And there is also a large radio station transmission system, if you like. It's the Trans World Radio's major Pacific transmitter station, and it's a multinational evangelical Christian media organization that goes out to more than 190 countries. Interesting. So, over the coming weeks, work is going to advance on the many military assets that are part of the islands, and they're going to show us some more details of that in a future newsletter. So, like I said, pretty close to being released, I think, this map, and hopefully we are getting very close to the 2.7 update. That's my hope. My fingers are crossed. I can't wait to see the clouds. I was going to talk about the mosquito very briefly again, but I don't really know what to say about it. It sounds like there may be a delay in the mosquito here. Remember that this was scheduled for Q1. There was some talk about it needing to be reworked, so I will find out a little bit more about that before I, open my big trap and have that wrong. But we haven't seen any feature videos. We haven't really seen, a couple of weeks ago we had some good intel, if you like, on it and where things were at. So stay tuned for more information on the mosquito as it comes to hand. In the interim, I think we'll wrap this up. It's been a fun week and a busy one for me, and I hope you have had something similar. Have a great weekend. Carry on flying. This is Prickly Hedgehog out. For now, we'll see you next time.
But I think they're still prickly by definition.
Kind of. But they're more prickly when they're irritated and aggravated. Otherwise, they lay down and they're very smooth to touch and pet, as long as you don't go against the spines. When they're irritated and aggravated is when they turn into balls of prickly doom.
So it's like stroking a shark in the wrong direction.
Yes.
Hello there.